You want to get to a stage whereby your desired results, the things that you freaking dream of and freaking want more than anything else in the world, become inevitable. Whereby you feel like, oh my gosh, this is just going to happen. It's natural. It becomes almost like a byproduct of who you are. It needs to become a byproduct of your identity, whereby you naturally start breathing in those results, whereby literally you just being you and you living as this next level identity, it becomes second nature. It becomes effortless. It becomes obvious that you would get those results. And it's funny because I was speaking to a client just a few days ago, and she literally said those words. She's like, now she recently basically had opportunities where she might be getting different investment offers that could be like $250,000, and she was saying now it just feels like, of course it's gonna happen, it's inevitable. And as I was listening to her thing, I was like, this is it. This is what happens with so many of my clients. It's like initially the first 3 to 4 months of working together one-on-one, a lot of the work is around identity. So really shifting their belief systems, their standards, their internal dialogue, their beliefs, their environment, their frequency, their way of showing up, their way of responding, their patterns. It's really constructing the version of them, the identity of them, that would naturally call in the results that they desire, so that it literally does become like inevitable, and not like it's something that you're trying to force or that you're trying to control or where you're trying to like manage your results, but whereby it's like, of course I get these results because it's just who I am. Right? And that's what I wanted to talk about today, is like, I want you to get to a stage whereby your results become freaking inevitable because it's simply who you are. And I remember when I was reading Atomic Habits by James Clear, that's something that he spoke about a lot in one of the chapters, where he said, like, behavior change, the core of behavior change is identity, right? If you can hit the identity piece, then things become so much more effortless, and there is much more ease, because you're not trying to do it. You're not trying to do it with willpower. You're not trying to force yourself. You're not trying to like convince yourself or manipulate yourself to do something or to take a certain action or to control a certain result in your life. Instead, it's like, it is literally who you are. So obviously you're going to get the result. So I wanted to give an example of this today. And I was thinking about a few years ago, I decided that basically I'd always been an athlete. I'd always worked out. I'd always done sports, worked out pretty much every day of my life, because of how I grew up. Like, I got into like sports early on, and then I just sort of like never stopped. But then a few years ago, I was like, but now I want to be like more toned. I want to be more defined. Like, I want to feel more like shredded, right? And that's something that I had always kind of desired, but I had never claimed it, right? There's a big difference between wanting something and actually saying, now I'm going to go out there and actually freaking have it, claiming the desire, being like, I'm now making a decision that this is now happening. Because there's a big difference between like being like, yeah, I want something, because so many people want things, but so many people don't have those things that they want, right? So there's a massive different like decision, right, that needs to happen. So anyway, I'm finally made this decision. I was like, I want to feel more toned, more shredded. I want to feel more sculpted. I want to feel stronger, and I want to feel like I can literally see the strength and definition in my arms and in my body and in my glutes and in my quads and all these things. And to be honest with you, at first, there's a lot of work I had to do, and that's for a whole other video, but around like my own internal blocks and beliefs around my body, and around like what was possible for me and what was available to me. So I had to do that work, and we can do a whole video on that. But then after I did that kind of internal work around clearing the blocks and beliefs around why I couldn't have that, what I did next was I started asking myself this question. I was like, what kind of person has the results that I want? So that level of definition, toned arms, toned legs. And by the way, you can do this in any area of your life, right? But I was like, okay, what kind of person has this result? And for me, the answers that came up right away were like personal trainers, CrossFit athletes, professional swimmers. I don't know. These are the kinds of people that came into my mind. And I was like, okay, so what feels most in alignment with me? because obviously everyone's different, everyone has different values, different interests, different passions, different desires, whatever. And I was like, okay, out of all of those identities, swimming's never really been for me. I don't really love swimming. I was like, okay, I don't want to do gymnastics, I don't want to do this thing over here, but I was like, you know what, I do love the idea of like CrossFit or something similar. And also I've always had a fondness for like, personal trainers. I think it's really cool what they do. I think it's really impressive. I love the idea around like the health aspect of it. So I was like, okay. So I was thinking that's kind of the identity I want to start embodying and constructing. Because like I said, I didn't want the results to be like fluctuating. I didn't want to like get stronger but then lose that strength. I didn't want to build muscle mass and then lose the muscle mass. I wanted this to be sustainable. I wanted this to be like a lifestyle change. And I think when it comes to any result, whether it's a business result, a career result, your love life, your body, your health, like it doesn't matter what it is, money, it's like you don't want something for a day or a few weeks or a few months. Like you want to have this ongoing, right? And for it to continue growing and progressing, right? So I was like, okay, I want this to be an identity change. So I was like, okay, what kind of person has that result? And I realized that for me, it was like a CrossFit athlete, a personal trainer. And then I was like, okay, what does that kind of person do? Like, how do they think? How do they view food? How do they view body, like composition, muscle mass, fat mass? Like, how do they think about hydration, water, rest, recovery? How do they think about meals? How do they think about putting on muscle? How do they think about exercises? How do they think about workouts? Like, what is their viewpoint? How I really was like trying to understand their world and really almost take on and adopt those belief systems and those feelings and that embodiment and that way of thinking, so that I could then go off and literally start embodying that myself. And that's exactly what I did. So I did a few different things, but one of the things I did is I joined this set of like workout classes, and it was similar to like small group personal training, right? And I started going to those classes, but I didn't just go to those classes. I started asking the personal trainers who would train us there, because there was opportunity to talk to them, because obviously between reps and between exercises. And I would ask them every question. I was like interviewing them, right? I was like, okay, like, tell me about your meals. Like, how much protein do you eat? And like, how do you think about your meals? And then I was like, how do you think about sugar? Because I had sugar cravings. And I was like, I'd love to know, like, what's your perspective on that? And I didn't just ask one trainer. I asked like 5 of them, because I wanted to hear every different person's like viewpoint and opinions, so that I could start building almost like a portfolio of identities and belief systems and standards and frequencies when it comes to building muscle and getting leaner and getting stronger and putting on more muscle mass, right? So I did that, and they started telling me really interesting things. I started asking them questions about recovery, like, how do you think about recovery? And they're like, oh yeah, I do 2 to 3 days of recovery a week. And I was like, really? Because at the time I was doing these like 15-20 minute workouts 7 days a week. And what was interesting is a lot of the women that I spoke to there who were absolutely shredded and so toned, is like they were doing something very different. They were doing more like 3 to 4 super heavy lift days, so strength and resistance. And then they were taking like 2 to 3 days off completely, besides like walking and some stretching. And I was like, wow. Like, and then I asked like a follow-up question. I wanted to go even deeper. I was like, okay, but I want to understand their mindset, right? Because I was building this mindset in myself, right? I was adopting these beliefs, these ideas, these ways of thinking, because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to become that version of me, so that I could have those results naturally, and so that they could become long-term and sustainable, not something that I would just have for like a minute and then they would go away. Like, I wanted this to be like long-term. So I was asking them these questions, and it was really interesting that they were like, oh yeah, like, I'm not afraid that I'm gonna like gain weight over the 2 or 3 days of recovery. And that was like mind-blowing, because I think I didn't realize until that point, until I started asking them questions about their mindset, I didn't realize that one of the things that I thought was that if I didn't work out several days a week, that somehow during those days I would like gain back loads of weight, or suddenly like my muscle wouldn't be able to be built. When really, the more I spoke to them, they were like, what do you mean? Like, muscle gets built during recovery, right? Like, for your muscle tears to repair, it needs rest, it needs recovery. So you're actually building muscle and you're actually growing the muscle during that like recovery time. And I was like, oh my God, my brain is getting blown by like all these stuff, like mind blown. And then I asked about food, I asked about exercise, I asked about reps, I asked about how do you increase weights, like you name it, I asked it. And then I started living it, right? I started embodying what they were sharing. I was going to like do 2 to 3 heavy weight days a week, and then the other days I would recover and rest. So I'd like go for a walk, I would stretch, I would do yoga, but like I would just, and even yoga did it really light. And I started seeing difference, and then I started really increasing my protein, which I had never even like properly considered. And then there are so many things that I shifted. And honestly, I don't know if it took like I don't know, a year and a half in or whatever. I remember one day just sort of looking at myself in the mirror and being like, "Oh my god, are those my arms?" Like cuz I suddenly had like this shoulder definition and this like arm definition. And I remember I was doing like, I don't know if it was push-ups or something in the workout, cuz I would go to these classes 3 times a week, and I remember looking at like my arms, and because I think I had just been I'd been so immersed in the process. I'd been falling in love with doing the workouts and just falling in love with like the journey, and I wasn't thinking about when am I going to get the result, right? I was just like loving the workouts, and I enjoyed going there. I enjoyed talking to people. The whole thing felt so juicy and good. And so when the results suddenly showed up, I I was like, "Oh my god." And then I thought to myself, "Well, I guess it makes sense, and I guess it is inevitable because I'm literally embodying what they've taught me, their mindset, their identity, their ways of thinking, their ways of responding, their ways of working out, their ways of showing up." And it's for me it was like, "Oh my gosh, like this is all makes sense why I'm now seeing the results that I have." But I do remember thinking like, "Oh my god." And I had the same experience with like my glutes. I was like, "Oh my god," I came out of the shower, I'm like, "Really? What is going on?" And then because I was like breastfeeding lows before, and so I had like no glutes whatsoever, and then suddenly like my glutes were there. And then also like my quad definition was just like nuts, and I was like, "Oh my god, I guess like if you think about it, it's been like a year and a half of me doing this stuff consistently. I guess it's not that surprising, right?" But this is why I'm so obsessed with this idea around identity mindset work. And it's why I work with my clients specifically around this, because it creates this like long-term sustainable change. And it becomes something whereby your results become inevitable because of who you are. And so now this is the question I want you to ask yourself today. First of all, what do you want? Get so freaking clear yet again. What do you really freaking want? And go big and go clear and just like literally be like, what do I desire? And really be honest. Be honest with what you freaking want. And then once you've been honest with what you want, I want you to ask yourself, what type of person has that result? And like look around, like at books or documentaries or on YouTube or, around the world. Like literally just ask yourself, like, what kind of person, what type of person has these results that I want? And then there are probably identities and roles that are going to come through, and you're going to be like, okay, so this is a list of identities or types of people who have the results that I want. And then you can like follow up and ask yourself, okay, out of those ones, based on my core values, who do I feel most aligned with? And you might choose 1 or 2 of those identities. And then you can go and you can literally start doing your research around what are their ways of thinking? How do they see things? How do they view their habits? What are their habits? What are their standards? What do they not tolerate? What internal dialogue do they not tolerate? How do they feel? What's their frequency like? What's their vibration like? How do they show up? How do they stand? How do they respond to circumstances? How do they think about certain areas, right? The more you can understand this kind of overarching identity, the more you can start literally embodying it, and you can start constructing and embodying this version of you. And we have so many versions of us, and we can pick and choose anything that feels aligned, right? Because everything is a choice. And so when you do that, you will literally start creating and calling in the results that you have been dreaming of. And better yet, it'll be sustainable because it'll literally be who you are, And it might take you 6 months or 8 months or 12 months or a year and a half, but ultimately you will literally have created what you wanted from a space of truly being in alignment with your own values. And you'll know that they're going to stick around because you've literally become that version of you. You've literally taken on and adopted those beliefs. You've literally taken on those habits. Like you have those standards now. It's literally you're breathing it, you're living it, you are it. So of course the results become inevitable for you because you have become that core identity. So now naturally, of course, those results come in because it's simply who you are. So this is what I want to hear this from you. So tell me in the comments, number 1, what do you freaking want? And number 2, what type of person has that result? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to see. And then if you aren't already, make sure that you subscribe so that you can follow the next videos that come through, because I have so much good stuff, juicy stuff that's coming your way. All right, have an insane day. Remember to comment below. I can't wait to read your comments, and I will see you for the next video.